and welcome to The Week That Was, TIOL's weekly news roundup.
Here are some of our news highlights today.
The India-Mauritius DTA is amended.
High Court demands update on Sistat President.
How will the WTO Trade Pact help India? Bureaucrats will tweet.
But first, let's see why telecom companies cannot be held responsible for call drops.
Customers will not be compensated for repeated call drops. The Supreme Court has set aside the TRI order that hauled up telecom companies with a penalty for call drops, stating that the TRI order was arbitrary and unreasonable. The Apex Court has held the TRI order to be unconstitutional and non-transparent. While TRI contended that a cartel of 4 or 5 telecom companies having a billion subscribers was making rupees 250 crore a day, they were not investing enough in infrastructure to improve network services. The telecom companies pleaded that the entire sector had to pay a big price for spectrum and was under huge debt, but they had still installed 2 lakh telecom towers in the past 15 months. Is that enough to support network services for a billion subscribers? Earlier, the Delhi High Court had upheld the TRI order. Will the Apex Court's decision make telecom companies abdicate all responsibility for call drops and poor services? The Delhi High Court has directed the government to provide an update on the appointment of the Sistat President.
The Delhi High Court has hauled up the central government for keeping the Sistat headless. For more than 2 months now, the government has not appointed a new president or vice president of Sistat. Work had grounded to a halt as there was no one to prepare the roster. To overcome the vacuum created by the retirement of the Sistat president, Justice Raghuram, the central government, issued an order authorizing the Sistat's judicial member, Mr. P. Ravindran, to prepare the roster of cases. The government's order was challenged before the High Court on the ground that the benches constituted by the member judicial were illegal and had neither the power nor the jurisdiction to hear cases. The High Court has, however, upheld the government order because Section 161 of the Customs Act provides the central government a general power to act in order to remove any difficulty in giving effect to the provisions of the Act. The High Court also directed the government to apprise the court on the steps taken to fill up the posts of President and Vice President of the Sistat. Meanwhile, matters will proceed as per the roster prepared by the member judicial. The government has amended the Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement with Mauritius to curb black money and bring about tax clarity.
India and Mauritius have signed the protocol to amend the 33-year-old Double Taxation Avoidance Agreement, which will allow India to tax capital gains from sale of shares in Indian companies by a Mauritian tax resident. This amendment, coming after 2 decades of negotiations, means that India has regained the right to tax capital gains on investments routed through Mauritius, a known tax haven, accounting as the biggest source of FDI and FPI inflows into India. The earlier DTAA completely exempted capital gains and allowed round-tripping of black money from India through conduit or shell companies. The amendment shall take effect on sale of Indian company shares acquired on or after April 1st, 2017. During the transition period of 2 years, the tax will be limited to half of the Indian tax rate, with the full tax rate kicking in from assessment year 2019-20. This amendment will also impact investments coming through Singapore due to the direct linkage between the Singapore and Mauritius DTAA clauses. The Singapore Treaty Clause states that as long as the Mauritius Treaty allows benefits to capital gains, Singapore residents would also get a similar benefit. Other amendments of the India-Mauritian Treaty provide for source-based taxation of interest income of Mauritius resident banks, updation of the Exchange of Information article, provision for assistance in collection of taxes, and source-based taxation of other income. These amendments allowing investors to plan tax and investments may result in a surge of inflows into India before April 2017. When access to justice is a fundamental right, does extended case backlog due to judge vacancies deny this right to the people?
India needs more than 70,000 judges to clear the huge case backlog due to the low ratio of judges to population. In 1987, the Law Commission had suggested the appointment of 44,000 judges to effectively tackle the number of pending cases then. But nearly 30 years later, India has only 18,000 judges, and we have added to the population and case pendency has grown drastically. There are more than 3.14 crore pending cases in various courts in the country. The Chief Justice of India, Mr. T.S. Thakur, announced this at the centennial celebrations of the Circuit Bench of the High Court. Out of some 900 sanctioned posts of judges in different high courts, there are more than 450 vacancies. There are around 170 proposals for appointment of high court judges which are pending with the government. Speedy appointments are the need of the hour because justice delayed is justice denied. Is the Law Ministry listening? A WTO trade agreement will help Indian exports.
Exporters usually have to forego a consignment that gets rejected. But this is about to change. A trade facilitation agreement backed by the World Trade Organization will now allow exported goods stopped in transit to be tested for the second time in case the first sample test results are adverse. This means participating countries, including India, will have the option of getting the consignment retested, and if the results are in its favor, shipping it to either to the same destination or sending them on to other markets. Under this trade agreement, countries cannot stop shipments in transit if they are headed for other destinations. The Trade Pact, which is part of the WTO's Bali Ministerial Trade Package, is aimed at curbing pressure tactics and informal, non-tariff measures used by the developed countries to crush exports by the developing countries. The provisions simplifying trade rules are intended to expedite the movement and clearance of goods, including goods in transit. The pact also contains measures for effective cooperation between customs and other authorities on trade facilitation and customs compliance issues. The agreement will come into force after it is formally accepted by 2/3 of the WTO membership. So far, 76 countries of the 162 WTO members have ratified this pact.
Bureaucrats will now have to get active on social media.
The government is encouraging its senior bureaucrats to highlight their department's achievements on social media. The Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances has decided that officers of the rank of Joint Secretary and above will hold a meeting every Thursday morning to discuss social media issues. Director rank officers will provide the relevant departmental achievements to be placed on social media websites, which shall have to be approved by a senior officer, joint secretary or additional secretary level. Senior bureaucrats may even be graded on the basis of their social media activity. But first, we think bureaucrats will need the necessary training for tweeting to boldly step into the social media center stage.
We now bring you some news tidbits from India and around the world.
Who is not interested in actor Mr. Amitabh Bachchan's income? Well, in a setback to the Bollywood star, the Supreme Court has upheld the invocation of revisionary powers by the Commissioner for the financial year 2001-02, which would include his income from the TV show Kaun Banega Crorepati and the rupees 3.17 crores spent on his personal security. The actor had declared an income of nearly rupees 15 crore and then revised the return to claim additional expenses. When asked to submit the details of these expenses, the actor refused, stating it was spent on his personal security and any disclosure would be detrimental to his security. While the High Court ruled in favor of the actor, the Supreme Court has upheld the invocation of revisionary powers under Section 263 of the Income Tax Act.
India passed the National Bankruptcy Bill in the Rajya Sabha this week, which will provide a singular framework for companies to be declared as insolvent and allow banks to recover their dues from such companies within 180 days, rather than wage protracted legal battles. One more step towards ease of doing business.
The International Energy Agency has announced that oil prices that are already tumbling are set to shrink dramatically later this year due to the global crude surplus. It also said that worldwide demand for oil is set to grow in 2016, with India as a star performer taking over from China as the main growth market for oil, driven by increased use of transport fuel. However, later in 2016, the global oil glut is projected to shrink. Still, oil supply will exceed the global demand.
Now some news from the underworld. A former model and air hostess, Ms. Sangeeta Chatterjee, who was also the girlfriend of a notorious international smuggler, has been arrested by the Chittoor police from her Kolkata apartment for being part of the countrywide Red Sanders smuggling network. Her smuggler boyfriend Markondan Lakshman, alias Lakshman Dange, alias Tamang, was arrested in 2014 by the Chittoor police from Nepal. Ms. Sangeeta Chatterjee is charged with helping to establish a huge network across India to move Red Sanders. She has hired a team of 20 lawyers to defend her.
A laborious policy maker is no more.
We are sad to announce the demise of TIOL's dear friend Mr. Gautam Bhattacharya, Principal Commissioner of Service Tax Pune. We have lost a candid critic, a knowledgeable writer, an energetic, witty orator and a brilliant taxman. He initiated the launch of a special TIOL column, ST Se GST Tak. He helped in the selection of a name for this column, which we have been running for the last 9 years. He also piloted it for several months in 2007 under his nickname GB. He was an inspiring bundle of humility and great philosopher of the virtues of simplicity on the earthy plane. He was liked and adored by both his friends and his foes for his authenticity and accommodative flexibility. May his soul rest in peace.
On this note, we conclude this bulletin of the week that was. Thank you for watching.
You may write us at editor@tiol.in. Have a cool weekend ahead.